Today in the shop, I'm working on the 2005 Toyota 4Runner. It's got a few bells and whistles installed by the previous owner that I want to remove. Now, one of those items are these bump stops. He removed the factory bump stops in the rear in order to fit these Timbren SES, which is Suspension Enhancement System bump stops, and these are supposed to help the springs when you have heavy loads on your truck, van, or SUV. And in this case, the previous owner was towing a trailer, so I'm assuming the truck had some sag when he had the trailer attached and got these bump stops added to help out with that. The second item I'm looking to remove is this draw-tight trailer brake control. This was added, obviously, aftermarket. It was a fairly simple install in that all of the plugs and everything required for that were already there because these vehicles could have been optioned with one from the factory. But this is aftermarket. I don't plan on using it again with any sort of trailer that would have its own brakes. And it just kind of gets in the way, and it has a big red display here. So I'm thinking I'm going to remove this. And the third thing in today's video is, well, it's this guy right here. This is somehow like an iPod adapter for the factory stereo there. And I don't know. I just think this is super old school, and I think I'm just gonna go ahead and remove this, which requires obviously taking that radio out and messing with the wiring. Now, I do not plan on towing any sort of heavy loads with this 4Runner anymore in its life. It's not gonna be towing a big, camper trailer. At the most, it might tow a small trailer just for runs to the dump and stuff like that. That being said, I do not need these bump stops. I don't need the spring helpers. But these Timbren units are actually really good. So doing my research, it seems that what I need to do is film these bump stops in action to see if they actually compress quite a lot or if they seem to be kind of hard. Now, I'm going to go out on a limb here and assume that they probably compress more than I'm thinking. And therefore, I may actually keep those. Inside this box, you can see I do have the factory bump stops that came installed on this vehicle. This is what they look like. They are obviously kind of like a hard rubber with just a simple bracket there. And I could very easily put those back on this 4Runner and have it ride just like the factory intended. So I think the very first stop with these bump stops is to test them out, see how they're working, see what they look like when they're being compressed, how much they compress, if they're a little too hard and maybe causing a more rough ride in this thing. Whereas if I were to put the factory bump stops back in that are a lot shorter, maybe that gives the spring more room to move and therefore causes a smoother ride. I don't know, but let's test it and find out. I've got a camera attached to the frame here looking right at that bump stop. So let's go take this thing out for a drive and see how it performs. Here's what it looks like with me just getting in the vehicle with my body weight. I weigh about 185 pounds. There. All right, we're in the vehicle. We've got the camera recording. We're gonna hit the road and first see what it looks like on the road. Then we'll go off-road a little bit. Unfortunately, there's not a whole lot of road bumps and things that I can really hit to test out those bump stops. Hopefully this does something and gives us some sort of result. All right, we're now going off the beaten path here. Just gonna try to get the suspension moving a little bit and see if we can have those bump stops contact the axle there. That looked like a good bump. I bet you we contacted the axle there. I just reviewed the footage. It was pretty surprising to see that those bump stops barely even came into contact with the axle at all. Even when I went off-road and was hitting some pretty good bumps, there was a couple, maybe 3, 4, 5 times where it slightly came into contact with the bump stops. Now, the good thing is that when I did see it come into contact with the bump stops relative to the weight of the vehicle and everything seemed like they were pretty squishy. So judging by the fact that they don't really ever come into contact, especially on a normal road, unless obviously I was to hit a really big bump. And then when I'm off-road, it's rare, and when they do, the bump stops seem to actually help. I think I'm gonna leave them on. I mean, it seems like a nice upgrade to have just on the vehicle. Even though I'm not really gonna be utilizing them, at least I know now that the suspension travel under normal conditions really isn't affected by those bump stops. And if I were to hit a big bump or a big pothole, maybe those bump stops would actually help the whole suspension anyway. Long story short, bump stops are staying for now. Let's move on to the next thing. And the next item we're going to deal with is this trailer brake control. And I am definitely going to be removing this because I will not need this at all. I need to remove some of these interior panels here in order to get at the connections. I think with this, all I do is just kind of pull it out. Yep. And then this, I believe, is like a screw, maybe? Yeah. Okay, there we go. And now this panel probably just pops out. Maybe. And here is the gist of it. We have our brake controller here. We have the wiring harness that comes from behind it. This harness itself has its own plug right here, and then it continues on where it terminates right here. You can see there's this white wire, which I believe is just a ground wire. Pull all that out and we can see up in there that it's just attached to a ground point. And the end of the actual harness here plugs right into this vehicle plug right here on the vehicle side. So I believe all I have to do is just unplug this. Just like that. And that leaves this whole thing disconnected with one simple plug. Well, there it is, the trailer brake controller successfully uninstalled. And it has its native wires coming out the back with a plug. And the purpose of that plug and this extra harness, of course, is to adapt it to whichever car you are installing it in. In this case, it is this 2005 Toyota 4Runner. So, trailer brake controller uninstalled. Now, what do I do with this? Does anyone want it? Well, we've already dealt with two things today. The first one being the bump stops, which I have decided after further consideration, I'm going to leave on for now. The second thing was that trailer brake control, which we did successfully remove. And the third thing is going to be this iPod attachment to the factory radio. Now, I did already remove this control input box. It was just a simple plug on the back and I was able to remove this. And what was kind of interesting is when I first took this out of the glove box, it felt warm. And it definitely does not feel like that right now being unplugged. So maybe this was staying on for some reason. And here's that cable and plug that plugged into that controller box. This cable runs back up in the dash and obviously is somehow tied into this radio, and I'm not exactly sure how yet. So of course I need to remove some of these trim panels, this air conditioning control center here, so that I can have access to the bolts for the radio. All right, you can see I have a lot of this stuff taken apart. A lot of the center console stuff is all taken apart in there. Here we have our HVAC controls, and I haven't disconnected that yet, but I just wanted to show you something. And the reason why, one of the great things about doing this, about uninstalling, about factory resetting your vehicle and uninstalling the previous owner's installations, is look at this. I don't know if this is going to be easy to show here, but you can see the screw head that's behind this black plastic here. Yeah, that's not supposed to be like that. With this center trim out, I can see I definitely need to do some cleaning there. I'm very happy that I'm doing this. And if we flip it around to the back here, you can see this control here has a bulb in it. Now that is the push knob for the 4-wheel drive, and you can see that brown button there. That is actually a bulb that is burnt out. I was wondering if that was supposed to light up, and yes it is, and now I can fix it. And we can also look and see the 10mm bolts that were installed incorrectly. It was not holding the trim panel in. And with all 4 bolts removed, this should slide right out. What do we got going on? Hopefully it's not too big of a deal. So you can see on the back of the radio here, this is the cord that is fed into the glove box, and it does terminate here into the back of the head unit with a factory style plug. Makes it easy on me to take this thing out. There we go. All right, that's it. That's the plug. We have all of that uninstalled. Now, one last note on this is after I took out this harness for that iPod attachment, there was a factory plug back there, this exact same shape and size, obviously, that went into the plug that this was in. So I don't know what that's all about, if that was a feature maybe that this car didn't come with, or if that's something to do with this stereo that now is active again. I really don't know. Maybe one of you guys know and you can comment below, but these are the nice things you can find by uninstalling the previous owner's installations. Factory reset. All of this stuff has been removed from the 4Runner. We have a trailer brake controller that, you know, some might argue would be useful and I should have left it in there, but you know, at the end of the day, I don't plan on ever needing this thing. And it's just another thing that's not factory Toyota to potentially malfunction. Same thing with this little adapter for the radio down here. When I took it out of the glove box, the vehicle was off and this thing was warm. That tells me that it was potentially on, like constantly, which isn't good. So I'm really happy that the uninstall process of all of this was so simple. This was all just plug and play stuff, so it was really easy to uninstall. And taking that radio adapter out of there allowed me to remove some of the trim pieces and find a bulb for the four-wheel drive control that was burnt out, and I was able to replace that, and now that works, which is awesome. So doing all of these things really is beneficial because number one, you're returning your vehicle back to factory the way it should be, right? You don't know who installed these things, if they did a good job, or if certain things were done incorrectly. It allows you to look for bits and pieces and screws that may be missing or installed incorrectly and install them correctly. And I think that right there is a huge benefit to removing some of these things to return your vehicle back to factory. And the whole reason why you want to do that is because these things can fail. There might be faulty wiring, there might be a short, there might be issues relating to things like this, so that if anything happens or goes wrong, I know that, hey, it's not some of this stuff because there is none of this stuff. And so now I think at this point, this vehicle is pretty much factory fresh, unless there's something I'm not thinking of, but I think it's factory. As for the bump stops, well, for now, I'm gonna leave them in there. They seem to rarely need to be used, but when they were, just from what I saw in this short little test, it looked like they were squishy enough to actually provide some benefit there. Also, those bump stops are fairly high quality, so I think they're gonna be just fine for now. Well, that'll do it for this one. If you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to hit that thumbs up. And if you've watched this far and you're not a subscriber to the channel, consider subscribing. I'm Jimmy for One Road here on YouTube, and I will see you in the next one.